My name is Willie Doolan. I'm 70 years of age. Joined the mining industry when I was 16, coming up 17 years of age. My father was a miner. Both my father and my mother, I was the only son in the family with two sisters, twin sisters who were 9 years older than me. Both my father and my mother, they didn't want me to go underground. Started an apprenticeship as an apprentice car mechanic. All my mates from within this community, I was born and bred in this community. The majority of people I grew up with, ran about with, a lot of them went to the mining industry. We had two pits, Cardown pit, Bedley pit. A lot of them worked in there. There was me working as an apprentice car mechanic. Very minimal wages. My friends, they were working in the coal industry, not in great wages, but certainly more wages than what I was on as an apprentice mechanic. So, unknown to my father and my mother, I went to Cardown Colliery, where my father worked, and went into the personnel manager and asked if there was any jobs going as a miner. I was asked if I had any relations worked in the pit. I indicated that my father had worked in the mining industry in Cardown pit for a long number of years, and that seemed to tick a box with the personnel manager, and I was given a day in which I could begin underground training. Now, I was delighted with that, but when I went home and told my father and mother, all hell broke loose.
Why is that then, Willie?
Because
why?
they didn't want me going underground. They knew the dangers and the hazards that existed underground. We had seen it in the past with the Auchengeek pit disaster, do you know what I mean? The loss of 47 miners, the devastation it brought to our community, the loss of friends, the loss of fathers, the loss of sons. We've seen the devastation that it had caused within it and the heartbreak that it brought to our community, all associated with mining. Plus, we had seen injuries, deaths, etc., that had happened in Cardown Colliery and indeed in Bedley Colliery and other collieries that existed not too far away from our community at that present time. But nevertheless, I was a stubborn bugger and I stood my ground, and I'm glad to say that I began working in the coal mining industry and I became a miner, and I worked in Cardown Colliery from 1971 up until its closure in September 1983.
Okay. So it's that kind of young, naive stubbornness, isn't it? That's what drives you forward. And it's probably the fact that, you know, it was more money as well, because I think that's what drives you when you're a kid. You want something else, you want more money, and there's always I don't know, is there an excitement to it? What was in you to want to do that, Willie?
Well, I mean, it was, first of all, it was people who you had come through schooling with, people who you ran about with in the communities. They were all working and they loved, albeit they were acutely aware of the dangers that were associated with mining, but they loved working in the mining industry. They loved the camaraderie that worked in, the people who worked in the mining industry, people who cared and loved one another, people who grew up within surrounding communities, people who never really had a lot of luxuries in life, but people who were prepared to stand together and people who were prepared to fight together for the want of a better living, a better community and a better life for the families that they represented. That's what I wanted. It was, albeit there was more finances, not a lot, but it was better than the money that was coming in as an apprentice mechanic.
So it made you feel more, it's more like being a part of something, isn't it, Willie?
Yeah.
It sounds like that. That's the kind of, that's
Yeah.
the pull, that's the draw to this thing. It's kind of, well, my mates are doing it. Everyone seems to be good. It's like, then you go a pub on a Friday night and all that. It's all of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's an association with everything that comes with a lifestyle choice of that.
Yeah.
And that sounds like that was the reason for it.
Yeah.
Especially, how old were you, 16?
16, coming at 17 years of age.
So obviously you went down, your parents weren't too happy because they know the dangers, because they've got more life experience than you have, but they've never been down there, was that right?
Yeah.
So you're the first one. So your parents didn't have experience of being down the pit, no?
Well, my father had.
Oh, your dad, so he put you off
my
it
father
because your dad
was a
got you.
miner.
Right, okay.
And then through me growing up as a child, I had experienced instances whereby my father had suffered broken legs, broken arms, etc.
Really?
Where he was off work for a long period of time, and the family had to endure the hardship that came along with that. I remember my father had a car. It's a vivid memory I've got in my mind. My father had a car on hire purchase, and I remember my father, been off work with a broken leg. And I remember the finance company coming to the house and taking away my father's car because he couldn't afford the upkeep while he was off work with a broken leg. My mother, she had 3 jobs. She worked as a housekeeper for the local doctor. She cleaned the doctor's surgeries. She cleaned the local chemist, etc. This was all to try and help the family financially. We were struggling. We weren't a big family. We didn't live in luxury or anything like that. It was basic. And anything we had in our household, it was all on hire purchase. Mm-hmm. It was never we were going out and paying, or my family, were going out and paying cash. We didn't have that. We didn't have that luxury. We faced hardship. We faced hardship because my father and mother, do you know what I mean? They were in employment that didn't, what's the word I'm looking for? They weren't lavished with high wages or anything like that. Mm. I remember my father coming home from the pit after doing a hard shift in the pit, and the first thing he would do was come home from the pit, a quick bite to eat, then out into the garage. My father, he tried to encourage me from a young laddie to take an interest in fixing cars. Mm-hmm. Hence the reason he tried to shoehorn me into being an apprentice car mechanic. My father used to fix cars, and that was additional money coming into the household to supplement the low wages that were coming from the pit.
So why did he? Clearly, it's not a sustainable living wage. Is kind of being down the pit. It must be. You get paid when you work. Was it that kind of situation?
Yeah, you got paid while you worked, but I mean, it was never a high wage.
Yeah.
Never a high wage. When you look at do you know what I mean? Even when I started in the pit as a 16, 17-year-old lad, bearing in mind that what had to come shortly after I began employment in the industry was the 1972 and 74 miners' strikes. They were about wages and conditions for the miners. And albeit 72, we never achieved a lot. The 72 strike, we never achieved a lot as far as enhancing the miner's wage. But the 74 strike, we were more successful in securing a more decent basic wage for the miner. Yeah. And that was where the miners started to reap these benefits.
It sounded like people wanted to work down the mine. It was part of the community, but the wages weren't great. And now you've got to kind of fight for better wages. Was it not the case of like your dad trying to go, why am I doing this? And why did that not discourage you as well? So it's a tough one because you've seen the struggles from your dad and he's had broken legs, and I completely get it. I would do the same with my kids. Why are you doing this? Get yourself doing that. He kind of was successful in getting you a different job in being a mechanic, and then you went back anyway. I can't imagine what he was thinking, you know. So he must have hated you for a bit. Yeah.
But I mean, what we have to remember, Dan, was, I mean, where we were brought up at that time, I mean, the community that we live in now, Moodiesburn is now a community which I would imagine we're talking about 10,000 people, a population of about 10,000 people. Back then, I'm talking about the 1970s, you maybe had about 2,000, 3,000 people. And and the majority of people that worked then, I recall it vividly, Dan. 6 o'clock in the morning, you would get down for the pit bus and you would have men standing waiting for the bus going to Cardown Colliery. Across the road, men standing waiting in the bus to take the day shift into Bedley Colliery. The same bus stops, you had men going to the steelworks. You had men waiting to go to get uplifted to take them to local brickworks. There was local hospitals too. Do you know what I mean? Moodiesburn was recognised predominantly as a mining community, and a lot of the people then going back, their futures were predominantly in mining, and I wanted to be part of my mining community.
Yeah.
I wanted to be part of that. I grew up and I seen giants of the community, and they were all proud miners. And I was so.
You kind of looked up to them in a way, didn't you?
Always. Do you know what I mean? And a lot of people tended to look down on the miners, but from where we were brought up, the miner was way up there, way up there. You were so proud of the miner, so proud of what he'd done, so proud the condition, not the conditions, but so proud of what he'd done and the conditions he worked in order to try and gain income for his family.
So it's almost like a respect of kind of putting themselves in that kind of danger, putting themselves in that position of being in the mine.
Yeah.
There's another respect to the game, isn't it? You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like revering somebody who's been to war or been to battle or something
Yeah.
like that. It's very
Yeah.
similar in a way, isn't it? To kind of revere these people who've done something which you kind of want to see it yourself.
Yeah.
Because it's very similar to army. You wouldn't go in the army to be shot at because you know the dangers. You know there's going to be something happening.
Yeah.
But you still want to experience it yourself.
Yeah.
There must have been something like that. Was it like that for you?
Oh,
Definitely.
Definitely. And I mean, I remember once all my training had been completed for underground, I remember getting sent to work underground in Cardown Pat. And I get sent along with my father to work with my father.
Oh, really?
And ironically or not, Dan, I couldn't swear working underground with my father. And if I swore, my father would hit me a slap in the back of the head. Enough of that language. And my father wasn't a holy guy. He was a miner.
Yeah.
He was a miner. But enough of that language, sir. That's the kind of upbringing I had, Dan. And I'm proud of that upbringing. And I believe it's that kind of upbringing that made me the caring, loving person that I am.
It must be quite difficult because it's built a community. It's kind of surrounded your whole world, and it is your whole world. And when that kind of starts to crumble, and you see there's issues around that as well with mining. What were the first issues you saw? Obviously, money, wages, unions, strikes. That's quite a difficult thing to go through as well. What was one of the major parts that shifted your ideology of miners, or was there any shift, or was there not any shift? I don't know.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, Dan, I think when you were new to the industry, it really, when you were faced with the horrendous conditions that miners had to work in on an hourly, on a daily basis, underground, it really hit you in the face. I mean, for example, underground, you had no toilets. You had no toilets whatsoever. Do you know what I mean? And I can always recall visitors coming underground to see what working underground actually meant, see what the conditions were actually like. And I remember once, police come down the pit on an underground visit. And no disrespect to the police, oh, excuse me, can we use your toilet? Yeah, away in that old road there. And that's all it was. I mean, there was no toilet facilities. And when you tell people that now, Dan, they're absolutely horrified about that. And you think about it now, in any workplace whatsoever, if they were faced with those conditions now, it would be a walkout.
Yeah.
A walkout. They wouldn't be allowed to do it. They wouldn't, no employer would be allowed to do that. Yet for years and years and years, that was the conditions miners had to endure on a daily basis.
It was just the norm, though, wasn't it? You didn't think of anything else because this was the job. This was the thing. Yeah.
exactly.
Because I've been on fishing boats and I was like, oh, lads, where's the toilet? And he's like, over the side, over there.
Yeah,
It's the
yeah,
same thing, isn't it?
take that bread wrapper where you that was your condition. And then when you seen the coal dust that was airborne and people at that particular time, and I mean it was only latter years that you were face masks and that became available to workers underground. Before that, they were never available. Never available. You were left to get on with it. You were left to work in conditions that, no doubt about it, they were absolutely harmful to your health. And as the years progressed, you see it, and I see it within myself now. Although I wasn't down the pit as often as some of my other colleagues, a lot of my time was spent at the trade union, etc. But I see myself still suffering from some of those conditions that we had to endure underground. So therefore, I then turn round and say, what about the poor miner who was down there 5 days, 7 days a week for 7.25 hours per day? The miner who had to work maybe 10 hours a day to enhance his wages, to help the upkeep of his family. What about them and the disease, the dirty, rotten diseases associated with the mining industry that they are now having to live with?
Yeah, it's frustrating because at the time you don't know, because we don't have the history. We can't look back on something that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah,
You don't know the health implications of it. It's like things now, you know, we don't know the health implications of things that we invent now.
Yeah.
We're only going to find out in 20 years' time. So it's quite hard to kind of, obviously, to second guess that. You can't see the future. So you just get on with it because that's the way things are.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, what changed from you being down the mine to becoming a trade union guy? Why did you do that? What was the change?
I mean, working underground, Dan, what I think greatly influenced me was the people I worked with. And at that particular time, I was only a young laddie, 18, 19-year-old. And I can remember going for my coalface training, 18-year-old. I had went to college and I was sitting a mining craft course, which on completion would have enabled me to become a fireman underground, like a gaffer underground. I'd done my coalface training at 18 years of age, and I'll never forget it. One of the guys who I'd done my coalface training with was a guy called John McGahey. John came from Cambuslang, and John was an older brother of the Scottish miners' president, Mick McGahey. And John really took me under his wing. A really absolute gentleman and a scholar and a product to his class. And John used to drum it into me about standing up for your class and standing up for the workers. And it left a lasting impression on me. And throughout...
Sorry, is that your phone? Hang on, we'll just stop. I'll just stop because I can't. I won't be able to hear the conversation over the phone. That's all right.
Sorry, Dan.
No. Let's go back. Let's talk about. You were talking about lasting impression.
Yep. And John, done my cold face training with John, and John, he took me under his wing, and he tutored me and encouraged me extremely. Do you know,
Was he trying to help you out in a way, trying to kind of get you out of that kind of condition?
He encouraged me in every way. Do you know what I mean? To become involved within the trade union, which I did. And at the age of 19, I became a branch committee member, which is the equivalent of a shop steward. And from the age of 19, Dan, right up to the closure of the coal industry in Scotland in 2002, I held a position within the union right through. And I was always to the forefront in fighting for the miners' causes. Always there on the issue of wages and conditions. And I was proud to do so. And always a staunch union man. And I was determined that in this modern day and age, that I wanted to bring the miners up onto a level whereby we were paid a fair wage, a decent wage for the conditions that we worked under, Dan. And I'm proud of the role that I played throughout all those years. And for a short period of time, I served on the Scottish Area Executive Committee of the Union. Also from 1985 until 2002, I also served as a branch delegate, which is away from the mining industry, is the equivalent of a convener's job. So that was a position I held from 1985 up till the end of the industry in 2002. So I was pleased, delighted that the miners supported me and held faith in me to represent them for all those years. Absolutely delighted. And I'm just pleased that even after the end of the coal industry in Scotland and Britain, that we're still carrying the name of the miners within our communities. Now, I know for a fact, Moodiesburn, you speak to a lot of the incomers coming into Moodiesburn, they'll tell you, even in this day and age, that Moodiesburn is still highly regarded as a miners' community. And I think if I can move on to the Miners' Memorial, I mean, each year you see it, Dan. We have a tremendous turnout there each year, community,
Yeah.
and widely respected throughout not only this community, but surrounding communities. And it's not just people who were associated and families who were associated with the mining industry who attend the memorial service. We have the churches, Salvation Army, local schools, primary and high schools, pensioners groups, local football teams, police. They all come and they're there, Dan, religiously every year at our memorial service. Politicians a lot, and they stand shoulder to shoulder with the miners and this, or the former miners in this community every year, stand together, still mourning the loss of the 47 miners who lost their lives and their families that day in September 1959.
Yeah, I think the thing is, it's extremely important to keep doing that, to keep on the memorial, because it passes passes the story on down the generations. It is important because you wouldn't be here without that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that does get lost as generations go down the line. But I'm pleased that people are still doing it, because it's a story. It's unique in its essence, but also it should be celebrated in a way of like, it built what you've got around you. It built who you are. Is there a danger of losing that, do you think, Willie?
No, I don't see any danger, Dan, whatsoever, because I see it increasing. I see it building, because I see more people, and I mean, we've seen it with the launch of Hugh's book. I mean, the other week there we had a night down here, the launch of Hugh's book, and it was chock-a-block, and people are now coming out, and they want to participate. They want to be part of our memorial service. Do you know what I mean? I can see it gaining momentum rather than the old. That, for example, in a couple of years' time, it'll be the 70th anniversary. God, I can recall the 50th anniversary, Dan, and not my crowd estimation, but the estimation of Police Scotland, 3,000 people at the 50th anniversary. Absolutely amazing. And I remember Mick McHackey turning round and saying to me, he says, God, I hope people remember me 50 years after my death. He said it's amazing the work that's done in this community, that they can still remember the miners and their families who lost their loved ones and their lives in the Auchengeek pit disaster 50 years ago. So I don't have fears, Dan, whatsoever of the support for the memorial service diminishing. I see it going the opposite way and growing. And what we've had in the past, you touched on it yourself earlier on, Dan, was passing this on to the future generations. And what we have done is kids from the high school addressing our memorial service. And you imagine how those kids feel when they have done that. That'll live with them for the rest of their lives. I mean, it's just amazing. And it's amazing how a young kid has the bravado to stand in front of an audience and pay tribute and homage to those families and the miners that lost their lives.
Yeah.
It's amazing, Dan. Amazing.
I think it's just about getting people involved and paying interest, and it's how you retell the story, because it's just how you shape it and how you tell that story, and it's how it's delivered and who it's delivered by and all of that kind of thing. So I just want to finish, Willie, on kind of it could be any message out there. You're quite positive about carrying the story forward. Anything you want to say to anybody out there?
Yeah. What I would say is, be proud of your class. Be proud of the class you belong to. And there is no class any bigger than the working class. And if the working class stand together, we can achieve what we need and what is best for us. And as many trade union leaders have said in the past, if we don't fight, we'll never win. And if we win, we've every chance of winning. And that's what I want to see as the working class standing united, standing together and fighting together. That's what I want to see, Dan.